for anybody who's gone through a branding exercise, it's quite in depth in terms of questionnaires that you're filling out, meetings that you're attending, you're answering very specific questions. You're talking about the product itself. You're talking about the values. You're talking about the people. You're talking about the code itself and what it aims to do. You're talking about the roadmap. You're talking about where you come from. And then basically through that process starts emerging over, I would say, I don't know how many hours, but over 100 hours, starts emerging themes and starts emerging trends and patterns in terms of what you're trying to embody within your brand and what you're trying to move away from for your brand, because this rebrand was definitely trying to move away from the old brand. And what came about from that are a series of other names as well. So I believe the first original short list had something like 8 to 12 different names. And in parallel to this, so you're doing kind of the naming, but in parallel to this, you're also doing the brand messaging and the values that you're trying to represent, and you're refining those. And then you're also doing the visual representations of. So even before you have your name, you're maybe starting to look at different themes of color palettes, of what you're trying to invoke with the visual identity. You're looking at different fonts. You're looking at different styles of artwork or different styles of visual representations. And all of this really comes together until ultimately we got, let's say, 2 different iterations. So one more on the messaging and one more on the visuals. And then you start blending those together. So where there are potential overlap. So I like this visual direction and this type of naming scheme. And then you're looking at the names from multiple viewpoints as well. So it's more than just the name and a void. It's looking at, can you actually secure trademarks? Can you secure domains? Is the SEO going to be somewhat difficult, or will it be favorable to be able to choose that particular name? What will that name invoke? Where does that name come from? Are there any others in the space that potentially have a similar name or similar visuals that you might be competing against? Yeah. Or are you carving your own niche? The name that you have, what are its inherent representations, or what does it invoke inherently when you hear the word? And then what you're trying to create, then what is missing from that, and how would you come and complement that? So it's obvious that when you think of an Antelope, you don't think of blockchain, or you don't think of technology. And so on the messaging side is where you reinforce that side of things. But what Antelope does evoke, and we're already starting to see it in the channels, it's this idea of speed, of agility, of moving as a herd, of strength in numbers, of being very, what would be the term, resilient as well as a species. So there's all these inherent properties to the Antelope that come into play that kind of start helping that. You also then start thinking of something simple. Like right now we released Leap 3.1, the version, or I guess the C+ implementation of EOS. But in the future, when we'll have different releases, do we potentially have a long list of names that we could choose from? So are we kind of pigeonholing ourselves within a particular name? And we had, like I said, 8 to 12 names at first that got weeded out to 4 and then ultimately to Antelope as the coalition. So all this process is also happening in a decentralized fashion with 4 different communities or 4 different members at the table that all come from different ways, reaching consensus on this one thing. Are you also pigeonholing yourself where in the future you might run out of release names or whatnot? So that comes into play. And that's really just on the naming side of things. On the visual side of things, what are you trying to invoke there? What maybe is lacking in the brand word that you'd like to complement in the logo, or even looking at the logo? What does that invoke? And so that particular logo has multiple things that it's aiming to represent. One of them being 2 chains together. So they're 2 interlocking horns. And so it's this idea of chains coming together, working on something. They also represent the chain, just like blockchain, very literally. They're open because some of the values that we're trying to represent are a sense of openness. And as the coalition, a sense of openness, of transparency, of being accommodating. There's also a sense of movement. So these 2 chains interlock. And when you look at them, they do show a going forward. And then going back to the name as well, going forward, the motto, or the leap. So leap forward, leap ahead, this concept of getting away with the past, moving into the future. I'm trying to condense down essentially more than 100 hours worth of back and forth between multiple entities and the branding agencies that ultimately led to this. And this is what we've been really excited to share with the communities, the 4 respective communities over the course of let's say 2 months or so, that name was changed, but then securing the assets, making sure the trademarks were okay, making sure that the visuals were on par, basically getting everything in line together leading to this has been a lot of work, and we're really excited about it.